What's up, guys? Max here with another episode of Unicorn Perspective. It's I think it's the third or fourth one I've done post Quinn, and I was doing a live training last night, and my buddy Rich Sheffrin was on. He's like, "You look way too rested to be a dad of a newborn." And I said, just because before I do any videos, I just caffeinate up, so that way for like an hour block, I can be as high energy and into it as I can. And then as soon as I end, it just goes right back down to me and Larissa, just like desperately trying to live and survive and take care of this baby. So I appreciate you being with me, Shay. I'm excited to chat with you. And I made sure to get all my energy in so I can be aware and awake for at least, I would say, 45 minutes. No guarantees beyond that point, though.
That's hilarious. Yeah, no, I'm in the same camp as everyone else. I would have said you look great. So thanks for having me.
What helps, the timing of it, I got like a DSLR and all like a new lighting rig and like a really good setup. So yeah. I got that right before the baby. So everyone kind of just sees like the video quality went way up. So even if I went down, like look wise, it kind of leveled it out. So I think that was a smart move on.
Or aren't you like concerned that people are like, oh, wow, now that he has a nicer camera, I can see he's actually he's not as attractive, but really you're no, I just became more tired as I got the
That is
camera.
True. It's like, wow, his eye is really droopy in those bags and stuff.
You should have switched to like a worse camera.
That would have been smart. I'm going to go back to like just my standard Mac webcam and not even the Brio that I was using. We're going way down.
Go way back.
I can even make that switch right now. I'm just gonna. There we go. There's me.
No, you look great. You look amazing.
I appreciate it. So there's a lot of stuff that I want to talk to you about today. And when we got started pre-interview, the one thing I said to you was like, I don't want to talk about LinkedIn hacks and marketing tips and stuff, mainly just because if anybody wants to find your advice and knowledge about LinkedIn, it's everywhere. Like they can go and follow you, and you post stuff all the time, and you've done tons of podcasts and you've spoken all these places, right? So it's already been done. And so whenever I talk to you, I'm like, well, I don't want to ask them specific questions they've already been asked before and they've already answered before, because that's not unique. That's not fun. It's not entertaining or valuable to people listening. And for both of us, it's boring for you. It's not fun for you. What I would want to talk about though, like a macro level and higher level, and this is something that's for me interesting. I'm curious about, like, LinkedIn's been this interesting platform in that I feel like the last 4 or 5 years, there's been these kind of OG Web 2.0 companies like Pinterest, like LinkedIn, that have still stayed very, very popular. They're still massive companies in the grand scheme of things, but they're still not like, I kind of almost like tier 2. I guess you get to bracket. Right. Like there's like Facebook. It's like they never peak. Yeah. So it's like, there's like Facebook really, and kind of Google, YouTube. And then there's like kind of everything else on the tier 2, whether it's, Snap and LinkedIn in terms of ad platforms and stuff. And some of these ones, like, do you see LinkedIn just like staying there indefinitely? Do you see like ever getting bigger or more widely adopted from marketers, from content producers, from people beyond just kind of the core user base that they've developed over the years? Or do you think they just stay niche to that niche is, in the grand scheme of things, not really niche, but like just business community, really focused there. And that's kind of their bread and butter, and it stays their bread and butter.
Yeah, well, it's a great question, and one I love to talk about because it is such a unique platform, in that it didn't really grow fast and hard like a lot of these. Facebook hit the scene and Instagram hit the scene, and it was like they blew up and they peaked relatively quick. I would say all of those platforms have probably already peaked, with the exception of YouTube. I think there's still a ton of opportunity on YouTube, even for new creators today. Trying to grow like a Facebook page today from scratch or an Instagram page from scratch, you and I know like that's quite challenging at this point. It's a lot more like pay to play on those platforms. On LinkedIn, there's no competition. Even though LinkedIn is older than the other platforms. Actually, I saw a graph recently. It's one of those like live motion, like moving. You could see the bar graph, moving over time, and it had all these platforms, and LinkedIn was like the first one on there. It was like one of the original platforms, and then Facebook came, passed it up. YouTube came, passed it up, but LinkedIn stays on the graph, and it's kind of interesting to watch from a LinkedIn fanatic perspective, you're like, oh wow, LinkedIn is just really like hung on there, but it's never been this like big buzzing platform. I feel it's much more slow and steady. It's much more, the tortoise wins the race, right?
Yeah.
Because the thing that I've learned about LinkedIn is that about 30% in my own personal collection of data and campaigning on the platform for years now, 30% of LinkedIn users don't use any other social media platform.
That's interesting.
So it is, right? Because I've done so many campaigns, like, oh, follow me on Facebook, connect with me, or go over to my Instagram here, and 30% of messages that I send out like that in that campaign come back with, oh, I'd love to, but I'm sorry, I don't use anything but LinkedIn. So like, why is that? And when you really break it down, it's because they're not actually social media users, they're business people. Like, that's it. The only reason they're on social media is for business. So of course they're going to go to LinkedIn. And that's why I think there's just so much missed opportunity on this platform even today. Has it gotten a little more competitive and saturated finally? Yes, but it's still really underrated, especially for people our age and our generation. They just think it's geeky. They think it's weird. I'm like, look, everyone on LinkedIn is in the mindset to do business. And everyone on LinkedIn, far more than other social media platforms anyway, is relatively educated with some sort of resource, with money, or maybe they don't have the money, but they have access to money because they're there on behalf of their boss or whatever. So, I would say for organic content, it is a must. And for myself, what I learned growing on the platform is just that I was able to talk about a lot more deep topics, not just business, but like, spirituality, personal development, because everyone on there is conscious. Everyone on there is working on themselves. You still get, haters and trolls, of course, any platform has them, but I do think it's a lot less on LinkedIn. And I think that's what's really caused LinkedIn to stand out from other platforms in terms of like, it's not really peaked or become this buzzing platform at any point in time, is because it's simply just business professionals cycling in and out, coming on and coming off to promote their products, to look for employees, to find recruiters, to grow their business, look for partners, look for vendors, look for someone to solve their problem. That's why people go on LinkedIn. And that's why, as a business owner, if you're creating content and you're not putting any of it on LinkedIn, I highly encourage you to reconsider that, because the views are cheap and there's not a lot to.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that stat's really interesting. I hadn't heard that before, but it's good to get some insight there, because you always assume that with 2.5+ billion users at Facebook, pretty much everyone in the first world has to be on the platform. I guess the difference is somebody might have in a profile there, they just don't use it, right? So it's about activity level as well, which I think factors into it.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up about LinkedIn. Most users on LinkedIn that have a profile aren't active. So that is also something that I do think people should consider. LinkedIn has about 700 million users now, but I mean, less than a fifth even log in monthly. It's like a very, very low percentage even log in monthly, because think about it. A lot of people just made a LinkedIn profile one rainy afternoon when they needed a job.
Yeah.
And that was it. They never got on there again. A lot of people just say, oh, it's my social resume. I already found a job, so why would I ever go on there again? So for job seekers, yes, those profiles are relatively inactive, but all of the entrepreneurs on there are active. I mean, people are constantly hustling, creating content, just like you and I on what we're doing here. People do this all the time on LinkedIn. They just collaborate, cross-post on each other's page, gain each other's connections. Yeah.
The one thing with LinkedIn that always has bothered me to an extent, and it's, I'm sure for you it's probably way more extreme just because of the following you have there. You're talking about like doing deals and deal flow and opportunities. It's very, very difficult to sift through the noise when people are communicating with you there compared to some other platforms. Meaning mainly like on Facebook and Instagram, like sure, I get plenty, like a good amount of spam messages, but like for the most part, most messages I get, I can go through and quickly realize like this is somebody actually wanting to, they want to hire us, they want to work with us. It's much a higher percentage of like that person actually wrote that to me, and it's an actual like opportunity. Whereas LinkedIn, it's at least for me, it's always been this challenge of like anytime I open the inbox, it's just
spam.
flooded of spam and regurgitated messages So I'm curious, like how does that factor into getting opportunities and deal flow? Because I feel like I miss things because I'm sure within all those hundreds and hundreds and hundred messages, there probably are some people that are actually writing messages, but I just give up. Like I've totally given up. I go in there, just mark, like bulk mark everything and just say read. Right. So the notifications come off my phone.
Yeah. It is true what you said about the spamming and the pitching. It's a little out of control. There's a lot of people using softwares, Chrome plugins, bots, like a lot of those messages, those pitches you got was probably never even like came from a human. You just ended up on some list, some demographic, and there it is. And I actually think that used to work on LinkedIn. I actually think that LinkedIn, like before the newsfeed became more traditional social media platform newsfeed on LinkedIn, because there for a long time was no video on LinkedIn. Remember, video just came out as a function a few years ago. Back when it was mainly recruiters, job seekers, I actually think that pitching was more accepted. I actually think that finding your target on LinkedIn and just pitching them directly was not a bad thing. I don't think it was even very frowned upon back then, because it was just a little bit more of exactly what the platform was made for. As it's evolved and become more like these traditional social media platforms where you've got video and you've got different creators and you've got the news feed, like people do just want free value. People do want to be entertained or edutained, I guess is the word you would say. And I really actually, Max, believe that's why I've been so successful. I've never pitched on LinkedIn. All of my leads come inbound. How much easier is it to pitch and sell someone that's coming to you like, hey, you seem to know a lot about like you seem to know a lot about LinkedIn video. How can you help me? And that's been my whole formula, is just creating content that's valuable. And as you and I know, coming from the world of Facebook, there's so many people our age like working on Facebook, understanding the video marketing, understanding how to edit, how to go viral, how to run ads. I lived on Facebook for years. That's actually how we first met, was my last agency. And like I just took all of that I had learned about Facebook video marketing and started applying it to LinkedIn. And whoa, was there no competition. It was like no one on LinkedIn had ever even seen an internet video before. Like I would get people messaging all the time like, I love how you do the cuts between your videos, because I would cut out all the pauses, so it's that like fast-paced YouTube vlog style. Yeah. And it was like, I'm like, dude, people like thought I invented it. They'd be like the Shay Rowbottom style. I'm like, no, not Shay Rowbottom style, just like first person to do it on LinkedIn. And like, for example, creating skit content, funny spoof videos, like I saw that was successful on the internet. I saw that got a good response. So I just started doing it, and I would do office themed skits. And like, again, poof, everyone's like, wow, this content's so amazing. But again, it's that 30%, a huge chunk of the audience. They're not even on other social media platforms. So to them, it is brand new. And I think when I got on the platform, there was not a lot of people doing video in general, but even the people that were utilizing video, they had no idea what they were doing. They were introducing themselves in the first 5 seconds. They weren't subtitling anything. Like I really came on and stood out like a sore thumb because I was one of the few people actually utilizing video and just providing free value without asking for anything. And B, I was fortunate enough to have that background of video licensing on Facebook, which allowed me to, over the course of 3 years working there, accumulate a lot of data, which I remember helped us with. Thank you. A lot of data on what goes viral and what actually gets a response in the news feed in regards to video and how you optimize it. So, I would say pitching. I'm not against pitching. I totally respect the hustle. I get pitched at all the time too, but I think what people on LinkedIn are greatly missing is the platform has changed. The platform has changed. It is no longer a platform where you can just ask for things and pitch. People want you to give them something. People want free value, and that's going to get them to know, like, and trust you. Click back to your profile, see what you do, and reach out to you for business.
100%. Yeah, that inbound deal flow is powerful. I mean, that's like, we get people ask us all the time, well, how do you grow your agency and how do you sell and stuff? And they want strategies. I'm like, well, we've never actually like done any selling ever for any consulting or agency stuff. Every deal we've ever done has come because people reach out to us. And unfortunately they want the strategy of how to do that. And it's not as, it's not like running ads. It takes a long time of building trust, authority, thought leadership in a space to get that that level of inbound deal flow. I mean, we've had people that have reached out 2-3 years after seeing me speak at an event that have been like, hey, I saw you speak at Ezra's event and I was following you silently kind of for 2 years. And now I'm a chief marketing officer at this big franchise and we want to hire you. Like, it happens a lot. But it's kind of indirect ROI. It's hard to trace that back.
Yeah. And a lot of what I teach, which I see you kind of organically creating for yourself, Max, is like when you become the influencer, it is so much easier to sell.
Yeah.
People, I mean, yes, I have programs and I have an agency for helping people with LinkedIn. But what I really learned over the years, growing my own following there, and I'm going to pass 500,000 this week on LinkedIn. That's amazing. So that's exciting. Yeah, thank you. Really, what I've learned growing there is people are buying me. They're buying me. They're buying the content that I put out there, my whole brand, my whole mission, my whole energy, my vibe. They want that. You know, they see the success that I've had on video, and it's beautiful because I get to be my own testimonial for my business because everything I do is video marketing. And they say, like, you know what, I want some of that. I want some of that Shay shine. And this is what I tell people is like, look, think about Grant Cardone. Let's just use, I'm in Miami.
Let's do it.
Grant's my go-to example. But let's just, like, for example, talk about Grant Cardone. Like, there's videos of him on the sales floor at Cardone Capital where he's got that big floor of closers.
Yep.
There's a guy on the phone, just an employee of Grant. He's closing and it's not going well. And Grant will walk in, pick up the phone, take it over and start saying like, hey, this is Grant Cardone and like, you need to buy this capital and this and that. And it'll work. Suddenly someone who was, cold and probably not going to buy, had a lot of objections. Well, now Grant himself gets on the phone and they're like, oh my God, of course, here, take my money. Because they're starstruck. It's like it's Grant Cardone. So I have gone through this whole journey of learning sales. I had a lot of self-esteem issues earlier in my career. I did not believe that I could do business, let alone sales on my own. I felt limited as a woman. I'm not. I later learned it's just a mindset issue. It was like a belief. So I wanted to learn sales, and I started to learn sales simultaneously as I grew my following. And the bigger and bigger I got, the more people sort of started to see me as this like distant figure, this like, oh, she's up there, which again, I'm not. I just happen to have 500,000 followers. But it's a mindset shift where I get them on the phone and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so easy to close that person, because all that work that we're typically trained to do on the beginning of a sales call about, establishing your authority, I've already done that. They are, like they already see me as the authority, and they're just so happy that they're talking to someone that they followed and looked up to for months or even years. For anyone looking to become an influencer, I mean, I will say it is an amazing path to taking your business into your own hands. Grant Cardone can cold call anyone and likely sell them because of the authority that he has built for himself with this following on social media. And that's what I've done for myself on LinkedIn. And that's mainly what I teach other people to do now. And it's what you're doing.
Yeah. Let's like pivot down that off of LinkedIn and more just on influencer and content creation stuff. Like I'm a little torn about the future direction of like the marketplace in terms of how big content creation and influencers have become. So part of me thinks it's a great thing, just like how e-com and dropshipping print on demand kind of it lowered the barriers to entry for most people. Whereas for a very, very long time, for centuries and millennia, if you wanted to start a business, right, you needed to have capital. You need to go find an actual brick and mortar piece of real estate, sign a 30-year lease. You need to hire employees. You need to buy inventory. You need all these things. And now you can, with $50 and an idea, you can start a Shopify business overnight, right? Mm-hmm. Which I think is great. I think there's so many benefits to that. There's also some like downsides to that. I think one of the downsides, and I talked about this last night in one of my training sessions, was because the barrier to entry is so low and it's so easy to do, I think it causes some people to think it's easy and to put less effort into it. Just because it's easy to get into it doesn't mean it's easy to succeed in it. And so I find the same thing happening with kind of the influencer world, where everybody can become a massive content producer nowadays, right? Everybody has the same opportunity to become as big as The Rock and as big as Taylor Swift, right? They could.
Yeah.
Yep. But and then you have just one fact, like that you have, studies coming out showing kids, like the top like when they ask, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? The top two are basically influencers. One is like a YouTube creator and one's an influencer. Like that's what they want to be.
Shut up. Really?
When they grow up. And so
yeah,
I guess the question is like, do you think it's more good than bad that's the trend? And
everyone has this
opportunity, and this is what people want to do, and everyone's kind of just, I want to be famous, I want to create content and go viral. And I have some like, additional points is why I think there's, different viewpoints there, but I'd love to just like, let's kick it off and see what you think top of mind.
I love where you're going with this, because this is going to lead me, if it's okay that we talk about this anyways, but this is going to lead me right into the conversation about why everything is becoming so censored.
Yep, let's do it.
It's actually related to what you say. I love what you said about like, okay, it used to be if you wanted to be famous or you wanted to start a business, even like you needed an agent, you need to have connections at Hollywood, or if you want to start a business, you needed, funding, resources, etc. The internet has changed the world. The internet is the sum total of mankind's knowledge all in one place. That's why you have all these communities that have been built all across the world. People who felt like they were alone in a certain very niche demographic, suddenly the internet pops up and they find people all over the world with their same interests. They create a little group. They got, it's very unifying. I believe the internet is a gift, and technology is neither good nor bad. It's an objective thing. It's the source. It's how healthy are we as the humans. That's going to be that's going to be the determining factor of whether or not technology empowers us or disempowers us. Some people you meet, they hate the internet. They're like, it's all negative. It's all comment wars. It's like, well, that's your reality that you're living in and your friend group that you're surrounded by. But there's also this area of the internet that can be extremely uplifting and this and that. So I always say, the internet in theory is not bad. It's the host. It's the humans. How healthy are we? And it's kind of like money. Money's an amplifier. The internet is an amplifier, right?
100%.
But I do want to say that it's leveled the playing field for anyone who wants to have a voice. As I was mentioning previously, if you want to be famous, you got to go to Hollywood. You got to have an agent. I mean, that has just completely disrupted the space where anyone with a cell phone, a video camera, and a computer or the internet access can start uploading content. And as long as it is of value in some way to some viewers out there, they can grow a following. They can grow authority. And now it's changed the planet because all of these people, ordinary, everyday people, myself included, I mean, we're able to now have a voice. And I like to look at social media very much as a democracy. Social media is a democracy. We vote on the content that we find interesting in or we find value in the form of a like, a comment, or a share. That's voting on social media. That's democracy. So the posts that go viral, in theory, you could look in a sense, you could almost look at it like, well, the reason it went viral is because so many people, quote, voted that this is interesting, this provided value to me, and I'm gonna therefore give it my engagement. Now more people will see it. It's disrupted the news. The mainstream news on television, it's not a democracy. It's just what you see is what you get. The news is hand selected for you. No one's voting on what's going to be seen. And that's my theory. Everyone's asking me about the censorship, because you and I know, we've worked on the internet for a long time. 2020 is like nothing else when it comes to censorship.
It's very different.
I mean, holy crap, the sudden censorship, it's very disturbing, but I do think I understand the reason. And I do think the reason is because too many individuals and there's so much diversity of thought that anyone can have a platform now. And so long as people on their own free will find it interesting, valuable, or engaging, they will promote it or vote on it in the form of their engagement so more people see it. So it's really disrupted the news. I think that the news a lot of people are waking up to has been like just mainly a propaganda machine. And social media is like democracy. Like, hey, let's all just share our thoughts, and whatever people like the most is going to be seen the most, because that's how these algorithms work. It's not anymore. It's changing. Even on LinkedIn, people are getting censored. People are getting shut down. There's less about like politics and strong opinionated stuff on LinkedIn, but it can still happen. So I would love to ask your opinion about this, Max, because what I see happening, and you might know more about this than me, is decentralized platforms, or what's being marketed as free speech decentralized platforms, because so many people in 2020, especially outspoken creators like myself, have been hit with the censorship and realized, whoa, I don't want to be limited in what I can share. And I sure as hell know that my audience loves hearing these things. So I'm going to go find another platform where I do have equal opportunity to share my voice and my opinions. And there's all these ones popping up. There's Parler, there's Web Talk now. It's kind of like a LinkedIn. What are your thoughts on that and where we're going with the decentralization?
It's interesting. And actually my thoughts have shifted and changed quite a bit the last year. And actually even in the last few days, just reading, I think this is like an important thing. And it's, I don't like to get, political or anything like that. I try to stay neutral because honestly, I'm a pretty neutral person. I really don't have I'm not very extreme in any viewpoint. I'm pretty down the middle.
And I think most people are.
Most people are. I think
most people are. We're only seeing the polarizations.
Yeah. So we see the extremes. We see the loudest people. I think that there's a problem of rewarding people. This is the challenge with how these platforms have been built, where they're built to display content to people based on what's most relevant to them and what's most popular. That the more, even if you're not really extreme in viewpoints, or even if you really didn't start out as a content creator, as a person with this angle in mind, if you dipped your feet into this, I've seen this happen to quite a few people I know, where they kind of dip their feet into the political space or into the left or the right, and all of a sudden their views went way up, and they're like, well, I'm onto something. And now all their content's that way. I've seen it happen to a lot of people, where now all the content they put out is very extreme on one path or the other. And these people I've known, and I, they're, at least until recently, they're not extreme people. They were like digital marketers, entrepreneurs, people that weren't political activists. And so that's been interesting. I think somewhat the threat of virality and the way these algorithms are built is that it inherently rewards polarization and inherently rewards extreme viewpoints, because that's what gets the most engagement, both positive and negative. And we run a political brand, so we see this in all of our ads and all of our comments. It's, extreme comments bring in more extreme comments because people on the one side hate this person. They argue, and this person comes back and argues, and people jump on and jump on and jump on.
Oh yeah.
So it's very extreme. And I think that's an issue. And I don't know how you really fix that issue. And honestly, I don't know how you fix a lot of these issues, which is the problem. It's just because I think these platforms are now a decade plus old, and I think they were built with good intentions, but the bones of them, the foundation, is the root of the problem. The way they were built, the purpose of them has now caused a lot of the problems we have. I think when you're talking about censorship, and you're talking about kind of Section 230 of the FCC.
Oh, dang. He's got the number.
Well, it's a big, it's a big act that was passed probably more than 2 decades ago, I think, at this point. But basically it's the piece of legislation that protects Facebook and Google from being sued from what's posted on their platform. So essentially it says their platforms, just like if you're a bookstore and a book in your bookstore says something that's slanderous or libelous. I always forget which one is in person, which one's written, but the bookstore can't be sued, but the author can be sued, right? So that kind of got translated to online forums and then to social networks.
Yeah.
So there's a big talk now in DC of revising that code, of changing it or getting rid of it. And a year ago, I put videos out where I was in favor kind of removing it altogether. Because I think at the time it was being these platforms were getting the benefit of this legislation without really following it, because they were still technically editing content, because they were removing things. They were deciding what can be on the platform, what can't, which is inherently you're an editor at that point. You're making decisions, conscious decisions, what's good, what's bad. I actually read, I think it was a Wall Street Journal article this week, and it was an article where basically 2 different thought leaders writing different opinions on the same thing. So one was for it, one was against it. And the person that was against repealing it did make some good points, which I hadn't thought about before, and it is valid, which is it's basically everyone has a line. It's very subjective, because people don't want to open Facebook and see porn. They don't want to open Facebook and see terrorists blowing themselves up. They don't want so there's certain content that most people universally say they should be off the platform. So it becomes a slippery slope of saying, well, okay, so why is it okay for Facebook and Google to not allow that content, but conservative, a conservative viewpoint or liberal viewpoint that might be considered extreme to a good chunk of people, but not to others, that content can stay. So that's where you start to get into this really gray area of, at the end of the day, the decision is subjective at some level. There's always going to be people that think something is okay, and there's people that think something's not okay. And the real question you get into is like, you either have to give people the ability to decide that like you can't touch anything, right? So like Facebook, Google, it's, hey, content that goes up there, you're a platform, you need to host it and support it. It's free speech, as long as it's not, hate speech, or as long as it's not inciting violence, or there's certain laws that protect, that make sure certain speech is not protected.
Right.
But anything else is a fair game. Or you need to say that Facebook and Google, these platforms, have the ability at their discretion to remove certain content based on their terms of use, like pornography, like extreme violence, which most people are like, yeah, that's fine. But I imagine there's people out there that probably are like, I think porn should be on Facebook. Like I want to log into Facebook and see porn, or I want to see violence. Like there's people out there that probably think that's okay. So it does get challenging. And I think not enough people, and then I'll let you jump in here on what you think about this. Like I think the biggest threat to just like civilization right now and like democracy and everything we have going on in 2020 is that people have a complete inability on both sides. I'm not singling out either side here, on the left and on the right, of being able to objectively read things, of being able to objectively look at an issue without their political viewpoint and agenda and let it make a decision on it. Like you don't have to, just because you're a Republican or Democrat or far right, far left, doesn't mean that every single viewpoint, every single issue, you need to universally, unilaterally be on that camp, right? Like we're independent. Right. We're human beings. We have free will. We have the ability to change our mind. We have the ability to learn and grow. I thought things when I was 15 that are stupid today. Like you evolve. I thought things 5 years ago, 1 year ago, that I don't agree with today. And so I think that's the biggest challenge I see like today, just repetitively, is smart people who I know there's no way that they can believe these things across the board.
Yeah.
But they're saying they believe these things and they're not changing their mind. They're not looking at reality, because that if they didn't believe it, then they wouldn't be 100% in. And if you're not 100% in nowadays, you're out. Like you can't be in these groups now. And that's really dangerous. Right. You can't be a Democrat. You can't be a Democrat today if you happen to think that it's not a good idea to raise taxes. Like if you think that, keeping low taxes is good, if you believe in capitalism. And you can't be a Republican today if you think that, a man should be able to marry a man. Like there are certain things that if you think one thing, you're no longer a Republican, you're no longer a Democrat, you're no longer part of this group, you get kicked out. And so these people don't want to lose their groups. And so they just go along with it. And I think that's super dangerous. And it's the irony of it all is a lot of these individuals have this kind of big fear of like Big Brother and, everyone's getting brainwashed to think one way. They're already doing it, right? Both sides. You're already doing it. You're already drinking the Kool-Aid. You're already brainwashed. Like if you can't have a independent thought and you can't objectively look at something and you can't change your mind ever, no matter what's presented to you, that's pretty terrible. And it's terrifying. And I think that's my big fear of what's happening right now. My big takeaway.
I love it. I love what you're saying. And it's a lot of what I talk about is like the core of like why that's happening in society. And it can be traced back to childhood and the way that we're raised. And I do want to give you kudos because like you are very objective. And as you said, you're in the middle. Like I have things that I believed a year ago that I already don't even believe. Like that's good. Like you should change. You should be able to look at past mistakes, correct, and evolve. So this whole like cancel culture, just as an example, pulling up old tweets someone said 12 years ago and then putting them on. I mean, yeah, it's like you guys, people make mistakes. People, it's a really it's a lot of childish behavior, and that's why we see this inability for people to change their mind when new information is presented to them that challenges their already existing beliefs, because these people are children. They are scared. Something happened in their childhood that really traumatized them, that kind of got them caught in this sort of victim mentality. And I swear this relates to social media. I'll get back to it, but it's like,
well, I don't care if it even does. This is interesting to me.
Yeah. Like, so the victim mentality that happens in childhood, which happens to a lot of us. I mean, childhood abuse is not that rare, even in a more covert form. Like, my mom was just very manipulative. Like, yeah, I was never hit, but like, there's a lot of ways in which we subconsciously devalue and dehumanize children in our culture that I think we don't realize. And the proof is in the pudding. I mean, when 1 in 4 women in this country is on antidepressants and male suicide rates going up, like, these kids, we clearly have some issues with the parenting and what we think is valuable for the children to learn. And it comes down to shame. A lot of these parents, they over shame their child. They genuinely just think they're doing the right thing. They think they're just trying to help. They're just course correcting parenting. But when you shame a child too much, you actually damage them to the point where they feel a split and they become identified in the victim identity, victim consciousness, which is heavily, heavily tied to perfectionism and righteousness. So going back to social media, it's like, why all the common wars? Why are these people can't change their minds when they are presented with new information? It's because they are terrified of shame, because they were over shamed as a child and they probably repressed it, probably don't even consciously realize why they feel like such a victim. But it has to do with the immense amount of shame that was already poured into them as a child. So any healthy shame that occurs as an adult, like, oh, I believed this about COVID, and then a doctor presented this study to me, and like, I'm going to change my mind. It's too shameful. Even something as simple as that, it's too shameful for them to admit that they were wrong, because it's triggering all of this unhealthy, toxic shame they grew up with. Shame in theory, like anything else, is not bad. It can be healthy. If you're a child and you hit someone and then your parent kind of shames you to go, like, that's good. That's healthy shame that the child should reflect and realize, I was bad, I was wrong, I'm going to think differently now. When the child has too much toxic shame, which is basically just like parents that tell their kids they're never good enough, oh, you didn't do this right, you're not doing that right, and just kind of projecting and beating onto their kid that their kid's not good enough, that's shame. And that kid is going to grow up with an inability to ever feel shame, even when it's good for them, even when that shame is healthy, even when that shame is going to cause them to reflect and go, oh, I was missing something here, I changed my mind, new information, okay, I'm open. And that's why we see all this righteousness. That's why we see all this polarization, people strongly identifying with a side because they feel at home and safe with that side. Because that side, as long as they take in all the beliefs that side has, that side is never going to shame them for anything. And in turn, they're going to continue to play out their childhood toxic shame by shaming the other side, right? So that's what you see when you see people, and this goes for any emotion, by the way, anger, jealousy, whatever. But when you see someone who is very frequently shaming others, I guarantee you they are suffering from their own deep-rooted toxic shame. And this is a big thing that I talk about, is the ascension that we are going through in 2020, the great awakening, as people want to call it. That's all it is coming back to the middle, is realizing, you guys, there's many different perspectives. It's okay to admit when you're wrong. It's okay to have beliefs on both that tend to align with either political party. That's fine. Everyone is so afraid of facing their own shame that these causes, these righteous causes that they suddenly become a part of, they tend to have a really hard time letting go of it, because it's going to force them to face their own shame. And then there's that whole saying of confirmation bias. So you mentioned like the algorithms on the platform, and like, okay, they're feeding people a loop of information that the person already believes, and the person is constantly looking for information to validate their already existing belief. So like the algorithms, yeah, you could argue it's part of the problem, but again, this goes back to what I said earlier, it's the host. It's that people are so easily manipulated, they can't even see, you know what, I'm like only getting fed liberal content suddenly. Like maybe something's up. Maybe I should go like follow a conservative page and just like start to be open to another perspective. So I do believe at the end of the day, it is the host. We are a wounded population. Most of us were over-shamed as children. We still didn't realize it. We don't know how to deal with it now. And it's created a world in which people lack critical thinking, and they lack the ability to be grounded and objective in their thought. And we're witnessing it play out on our favorite social media platforms.
Yeah, I'm almost wondering, it sounds pretty crazy to even say this, but it's something I've thought about. Like, if it was almost better in the grand scheme of things to have like less democratization of content creation, and like fewer news networks, like fewer, you know, back in the day you had 3 news networks, right? And even before kind of Web 2.0 and stuff, you had, you know, a handful of big news organizations and TV channels, and they obviously all have agendas and they're obviously all biased. But at least then, like, MSNBC is openly left. They're far left. Fox News is on the right. CNN says they're neutral, but they're more left. Like, we all know these things, right? We're all aware of it. And at least I know whatever my political leanings are. Like, I know Rachel Maddow's never going to get on MSNBC and like pitch some crazy, extreme, radical, far left conspiracy theories. Like, she might make some, you know, have some opinionated things, but like, I know there's not gonna be crazy extreme stuff. Just like I know, you know, Fox News is not going to be like wildly crazy, you know, stuff, right? Occasionally maybe there is, but like just in the grand scheme of things, right? Most content is just delivering the news with a spin, right or left on it. But now you have everybody can have millions, tens of millions, gets to tens of millions of viewers, right, on their podcast, on their YouTube show. And there's no regulation, there's no control over that, which it sounds weird to say. That's a good thing. I want free speech, but it's also part of me is like, going down that path, can it potentially do more damage just because of the fact that now, like, if you're really going to the extremes, like the example I'll give is, like, apparently now Fox News is not conservative enough. Like, this is, since the election, Fox News has been losing viewers, and they've been going to Newsmax, OAN, these other channels, because Fox News called, you know, Arizona for Biden, and they retracted it, and like a few other things. And like, to me, that's kind of dangerous. Like, if you're a Republican and you're saying Fox News is not Republican enough for you, like, and I need to go seek out somebody that's even more conservative, somebody that's that's basically anything Trump says, they're going to back 110% regardless. And again, like, it's not about a Trump thing. I'm not saying, you know, what Trump says is bad or good. I'm just saying I'm just saying, like, the president can every now and then say some things that probably aren't, you know, the right things to say. And we can all objectively say that, right? And every president's been that way. Every president said things that they shouldn't have said, and they've made mistakes, and they've said things that are wrong. They've done things that are wrong. What we don't need is like more channels on the far left and the far right. that people can keep going further out and getting more confirmation of their viewpoints. So I do view that as somewhat of a double-edged sword. And it's hard for me to say that because it's also like, I'm a big free market person. I'm a big capitalist. I'm like, I don't want censorship. I want less government. I want less control. I want less interventions. But I've also been thinking this last few months of like, okay, I want these things and I really fundamentally believe in these things, but I also see what's happening right in front of my eyes. And what's happening right in front of my eyes is you now have like Facebook, Google, these like they're too left, they're too right. Both parties think they're going for the other party, like, which is crazy. That like that can't be the case. You can't have the one event happening with two outcomes. Like, it doesn't happen that way, right? It's not reality. But it's viewed that way by both parties because they find examples that support their cause. And it does seem like a slippery slope to me where legacy media is losing ground, right? It's every month, every year, legacy media. And by legacy media, I mean like the big newspapers, the big TV networks. They're struggling to keep up. Like Fox, CNN, New York Times, like those are legacy media. They've been around for a very long time. They're losing ground to, you know, Joe Rogan and Ben Shapiro and people that have, you know, massive followings. And again, I think on its face value, I love that. I think that's a great thing. I think competition is a great thing. What I get nervous about is because there's so much selection and because anybody can become a content creator without needing any credentials, without having any background, without being even educated, like all of a sudden can sway the opinions of millions of people. And that does slightly worry me of like what that looks like in 10 years from now. If it keeps going down this path where everyone just creates these like niche communities that have no rules, that have no filters, where it just breeds extremism, because most people are not extreme, but there are going to be people that are extreme on both sides. And I feel like if those people are free to essentially say and do whatever they want and they're amplified, that can bring more and more people. You look, and again, I'm not comparing, this can be a bad analogy, I'm sure I'm going to hate for this, but like terrorist organizations, you look like ISIS and stuff, like they got massively big really fast because of their leveraging social media. Like they figured out how to use social media. They figured out how to put out these viral videos, and they recruited a lot of people. And so it has happened before. Cults do it, terrorist organizations do it. And so I think there's a inherent fear on my end of it going too far to one path. But I don't know how to balance it. Like I can't in my head, I can't remedy that. I can't say like I'm for free speech and I'm for all these things, the Constitution, but I'm also hesitant about this. It's very hard for me to align those two things.
You bring up a really good point, and you touched on it earlier, even with like the censorship. Like, you know, there are some things that should rightfully be censored, like child porn or what, you know, like I think everyone would agree that's not for Facebook or anything.
Yeah.
We can make a whole other episode about the dark web and child porn. But anyways, like I get what you're saying, but I also think what's really important to always remember is like, okay, fine. So there's more restrictions, there's less freedom for these average Joes to suddenly come on and create and potentially have a dangerous righteous cause that attracts a lot of people very quickly because of that freedom. But we also have to, and I realize that's a possibility, you know, that's a downside of the freedom. But I always come back to the question of like, but then who's in control? But then who is deciding that this is dangerous and unsafe? You know, that's really what it comes down to, is individual sovereignty. You know, I believe that I don't know much about ISIS or the example you used, but like that unfortunately is a side effect of the free market, of the capitalist society, of the reality that I think most of us want to stay in, which is like individual sovereignty and freedom of speech. And we're going to leave it up to you, the individual, to empower yourself and discern truth based on what's presented to you. So, you know, I highly disagree with this whole narrative of, oh, we're censoring all the content because it's for your safety. You know, to me, that's like, it's very disempowering to a human being. That's like saying you're not smart enough to discern truth and be able to look at, you know, alternative viewpoints, different information, and be able to formulate an opinion on your own, whether or not it rings true for you. I feel that is just very disempowering for the population. And on the same breath, you know, Jordan Peterson, Dr. Jordan Peterson, you probably know, he's a good example. Yeah, he's a good example of this. Like, he really is not political, actually. He doesn't identify with one side or the other, I don't believe, anyways.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, but he, because of a lot of his beliefs, were happening to align with like right-wing conservatives at that time. He started to be called like
all right.
They called him like a white supremacist and all, and he's like, whoa, you know, like this. And again, that goes back to the polarization of, you know, you see one belief someone has and you immediately judge them and, oh, they must be racist. It's like that's such toxic black and white thinking. But what Jordan said about it when he confronted it, because he was like, whoa, everyone's thinking I'm like a right-wing, like conservative spokesman. And he came on and he said, you know, the very thing that I have been fighting for and I have been teaching and preaching in my work is that I don't think anyone should heavily identify and band together too tightly in ideological groups, and instead should focus on what they individually believe and radiate that into the world and be a good example, for your neighbor, et cetera, et cetera. So he actually completely, kind of condemned this whole like identifying with a certain demographic and a certain group, because he, as a philosopher, sees the trap of it gets you stuck. It gets you stuck if you're too deep in that cult. I'll just call it. It's going to become harder and harder to see outside perspectives. So at the end of the day, I get what you're saying. I think the free market can be dangerous. People who are extreme, who are already deeply believing of something, are going to look for external forces to validate that belief and jump on the bandwagon. That's not the answer either. But I do think the gift of social media and 2020 is it's pulled us to such extremes with the polarization, where we see now how divided we've become, that it's actually waking us up. It's actually finally getting people to wake up and see, like, wait a minute, maybe there's a middle ground. Maybe there's actually like some other force at play that wants us to be divided and wants us to be low consciousness and in that place of black and white thinking, and it's all or nothing, because those are very, very low human vibrations. That's not the highest truth. The higher truth is that there are many perspectives to many different events, and that most people, when they say this is true, for them it is true, and we get to respect that and listen and understand the different perspectives. So those are my thoughts. Is like, at the end of the day, I do think there'll always be some level of censorship. Like I mentioned, the child porn example, ISIS, it would have been good to have censored, but it's like, it is a small price to pay to maintain our individual sovereignty and not give away power to the government of like, well, you decide what we should watch and what we shouldn't. Because I think that's a slippery slope to just another form of mass indoctrination and mind control.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. At a fundamental like level for me, all for just let people do and say whatever they want, as long as it doesn't impact other people or hurt other people and doesn't cause like harm. Yeah,
right, but that's the manipulation going on right now. Is everyone is shaming people, saying even if what they said really isn't causing harm, they'll say like, you're causing harm, or like, you're promoting terrorism, or it's like we're shaming one another. So again, who's the judge? Who's the judge to say that this causes harm?
That's the big problem. Yeah. I think that's the $1 trillion question, right? Is that the goalpost keeps getting moved. Is who sets facts, or what are facts, right? So I think that's like, I have no problem with anybody sharing their opinions, their beliefs, gods they believe in, what gods they don't believe in. Like, we are all free to say, believe, and think whatever we want. I think what's the biggest thing that I've noticed in 2020 especially is that people are looking at situations that there's a fact, they're like a universal fact of what this is, and the facts are no longer agreed upon. That's what's gotten really slippery, is like, if we can't agree on base facts, right? The fact that like nowadays we can't even agree that the Earth's round, right? And I don't know if you're a flat earther. If you are, I apologize. But we literally can't even agree on things like that like we figured out hundreds of years ago. We can't agree on things like that, let alone anything else, right? Masks is good, masks are bad. COVID, was created here. COVID was created here. Like Trump's racist, not a racist. Like, there's all these things that parties have set their own facts. This is what the fact is. And if you disagree with it, it's because you're a terrible person or racist or whatever. Like, that I think is the biggest problem. I think if we could figure out how to like agree on facts and like set facts and like, but again, it's a circle. You're always going to come back to the point of like, well, who then sets that, right? There has to be somebody or some group that says that this is what it is, right? There's people that discovered this is your heart. Like, your heart does this. Your brain does this. Humans have 2 arms. This is like, dogs are this. Like, at some point, an individual or a group of individuals had to make a statement and discover something and say, this is what it is. And we all went along with it, right? Words go in the dictionary and they're set by a panel, right? That this is going to go in the dictionary. And we all agree that this is a real word now. It's in the dictionary. We can play it on Scrabble. And so, yeah, it's challenging because this goes back to just us being humans and us being subjective and having biases. Like, we are all going to be okay with certain things being decided for us, and we're fine with that. Like nobody's gonna, I think, get up in arms that a dog is a dog and that somebody else decided that that's what we're gonna call it, right? It's like, no, those things are dogs. But when it has to do with something in my sphere, then all of a sudden it's, well, I don't agree with that being the reality and fact. And this person who said it's a fact and reality, they have an agenda. And so again, it's like, I don't know what the answer. These things are so challenging and so perplexing, and it's just, you can spend years talking, debating, and thinking through them. Again,
but I love the way your mind works, because I noticed this like right away when I met you, because you are so analytical that you're like the type of person that's always going to look for the facts. Like you're not. You definitely don't strike me as someone who makes decisions based on emotion. I'll just say, it's like, what are the facts? But I also do think that's like this whole like, okay, then there's many different facts and we don't know what to believe. We used to all agree on like the science is the science and the facts are the facts. I actually see from a more like higher kind of spiritual perspective, what's happening is for the first time, and I don't know if you're like atheist or whatever, but a lot of like heavily scientific people are like, they don't like believe in God and they kind of like just write all that off as woo woo. But what's happening for the first time is like science and spirituality, I think, are finally like meeting. You've got people like Dr. Bruce Lipton. You've got Dr. Joe Dispenza teaching about the science of our mental state and the vibration, because everything's a frequency. You are a frequency, I am a frequency, this monitor is a frequency. Like the vibration of your frequency has an impact on your external world and what you're going to manifest, all the way down to illness, like all the way down to COVID. Like COVID is a virus. Viruses are frequencies. If you're afraid, you're more susceptible to COVID. And that's like what I think there's this whole uproar about like facts. People are like, science is science, be afraid. There's a virus going around, wear a mask. But then you got people like Dr. Bruce Lipton coming out saying like, no, you guys, science is actually kind of like merging with spirituality, where the spiritual teachings probably always would have said like, just be zen and you won't be affected. And then people who are scientific are like, what are you fucking talking about? That doesn't make any sense. But no. Dr. Bruce Lipton and these people are actually connecting the dots now. He has a segment on how fear scientifically, and I can't break it down like he could, so go watch Dr. Bruce Lipton, but he has a video about how fear, scientifically, it is proven that fear weakens the immune system.
Well, yeah, fear causes stress. Stress can weaken your,
exactly.
Yeah, there's science to that, yeah.
So it's like, how do you feel about that? Do you see like science and spirituality for the first time and maybe ever kind of like finally like merging, and we're realizing like, oh gosh, maybe there is more to just science and data and facts, and also more to just, it's God and it's the Bible and just believe it and shut up and don't look at facts. It's like, could those worlds finally be kind of meeting in the middle?
I don't know. Well, first of all, I'm very ignorant when it comes to religion, because I'm not a religious person. That being said, I'm not religious either, for the record. I'd like to believe that there's some type of higher power, whatever you call that thing, right? I don't know what it is, but like, I think deep down, how to believe there's something bigger, right? There's some bigger picture, and whether it's like a simulation that we're in, or whether like, it doesn't have to be like a guy in the sky, right? It can be a lot of things that are bigger than us, that like there's a greater purpose to the world than just us, working for 6 years and 7 years and then just dying. Like that's it, right? I mean, again, I think you're probably seeing more of that because you're also seeing more people being able to get their voices out there. It goes back to like how that's been flattened, but content out where
anyone can have a voice.
Yeah. If you were somebody that had a fringe viewpoint 50 years ago in the scientific community that wouldn't get published by a major publication, you probably couldn't get research out there. You couldn't get papers out there, even if it had validity, because it was, it had a spin on it that they didn't agree with. Whereas now you can start a YouTube channel, and guess what? There's a lot of people out there that probably want to believe those things, or that's what they do believe, but they're looking for more people to support their beliefs, and they're going to build an audience. And I think that's a lot of the communities we're seeing now, where it's people that already have a baseline view and the way they look at the world, and they're going out online, they're going out in their day, and they're looking for confirmation of their viewpoints. They're looking for more people that agree with them. They're looking for more experts that have research and data that supports their viewpoints. And so you're seeing that continue community development. So yeah, if you have people like that where it's, hey, they believe in this merger of science and spirituality, and they talk about how these things interact, like it's the first time in history you'll probably have those people be able to actually have an audience and share their viewpoint. So it's definitely, I don't know if we're going to see, I don't know if it's the reality is that like there's more people that believe those things today, or there's just those people are now being heard. And 50 years ago, 20 years ago, like those people were out there, but nobody knew about them because they didn't have a place to communicate and share their viewpoints. And nobody even knew there was a viewpoint. So it was just like kind of under the rug.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's beautiful what you're saying about, 50 years ago versus today, and the flat earthers. Like, that's actually a really funny example. Like, somebody just went online, said the earth is flat, and like gained a shit ton of followers. Actually, small joke here. The founder of like the flat earth, his last name is Rowbottom.
Yep. I've watched an embarrassing amount of documentaries about flat earth because you get sucked into this whole
it's hilarious. It really is.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too. I do think people are starting to look past the lens of just like accepting everything presented to them as truth on social media or mainstream news, because they're seeing like there's something a little off. For example, like anything against the mainstream narrative is getting like immediately removed, deemed as a dangerous conspiracy theorist. But then flat earthers are like the top of the YouTube search. So it's like, why are they like, it's like they're almost trying to keep conspiracy theories in this wacky category, when it's like, no, there's a lot of conspiracy theories that are actually seem to make a lot of sense and people would entertain much more than something as ridiculous as the earth being flat.
It's a very good point.
And I think that, yeah, and I think that we are seeing a really big wake-up call with our health, with our physical health. It's funny that this, like, the whole 2020 was this virus. It's like we manifested this virus. We've been sick for decades. We've been getting sicker. We've been getting fatter. We've been getting more mentally ill. And so what's happened is people are finally waking up to question the medical system, the current sick care or health care, but it's really like sick care system that really is designed for profit and is designed to keep customers for life coming back and back again, dependent on a medication. That is not really medicine. True medicine, or naturopathy, if you've ever explored that path, you don't see that doctor for the rest of your life, because you see them a few times. They get to the root cause, which is oftentimes is linked to something emotional or traumatic that happened in your past that's now manifesting in physical illness. They get to the root cause and you're healed for good. You don't ever have to come back again. So and I'm not saying there's not a use for Western medicine. Obviously, please, like if my guts are hanging out from a car accident, take me to a college trained surgeon. Like there's uses. I'm not dissing all Western medicine, but I do believe it's grossly overused. And I think people are waking up to this idea of like, oh, maybe like humans weren't meant to be on a pill their entire life. And maybe there's a reason we've been getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And it's linked to our emotional state, because for so long we've valued things in society and prioritize things in our society that don't actually suit the human spirit, or like I was talking about earlier, the spirit of actually raising a child to be authentic and truly love themselves. That gets very messed up. So these facts in medicine, well, at one time could have been largely accepted. I do believe there's a lot of new information coming out that's being suppressed because people in the medical or pharmaceutical industries will actually start to lose profit if this new medical information gets out. That there's, alternative ways to heal, that, you can get to the root cause of your illness and uproot it yourself. I know for myself, I had asthma. I had chronic asthma for many years. I was really depressed about it. I was on 2 prescription inhalers every day, one an albuterol, one a steroid. I was just perpetually sick, and I went to Western doctor after Western doctor. They all told me, this is just, you'll have this for life. This is just your genes. My mom had it. They're like, you're going to have to be on inhalers your whole life. There's no cure. And I was so fucking determined. I refused to hear it. I refused to hear it. When they said you're going to be on this my whole life, I was like, no. I just knew in my gut. I'm like, I'm not. There's no fucking way I'm going to be sucking on inhalers my own life. I'm going to figure it out. And I went to a naturopath. I found a woman. She was an Ayurvedic doctor, practiced ancient Indian medicine. And within 2 weeks, my asthma was gone. This was 3.5 years ago. I've never used an inhaler again. So, I mean, and also I only saw her one time. No, wait. I went in the office and physically saw her twice. It was expensive. Don't get me wrong. People are like, oh, natural medicine so expensive. Yeah, you guys, but I paid her twice and I never had to see her again. That's real healing.
Yeah.
That's what people are waking up to. So I love what you said about like, we can't agree on facts anymore. Why can't we agree on facts anymore? Max, I think this is why I think some people are going to no longer benefit when new facts arise that now counter what we used to agree was fact. So there's like people and the medical industry is just one example. This is all over the place, but there's people like clinging to the original facts because they had some sort of gain from that being a widely believed fact. And I do think it's shifting now and people are starting to question what is actually real.
100%. Yeah. And, I think we could go down this thread for a long time. I think we'll probably have to do another episode.
Yeah, we'll do another.
Because I want to be respectful of your time. We're already like 60 minutes over and don't want to keep you hung up too long. But before I let you go, is there anywhere that people that are listening right now that want to learn more about you, want to learn more about LinkedIn marketing, content creation, all the stuff that you talk about selling, where can they go to find more?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This has been awesome.
Of course.
And I always love watching your show and getting your tips. And as I mentioned, you just have such a grounded, logical perspective on things. And I really super appreciate that. So yeah, if you want to learn more about LinkedIn and how you can thrive here too, it's a great place for business. Like I was mentioning, I still think it's a standalone platform and that there's not a lot of other platforms with this many educated people on it with money. Just hit up my website, shayrowbottom.com. I do have an online boot camp that you can sign up for. It's a do-it-yourself. There's group coaching calls. I teach you everything I know about video. I do also have an agency that's done for you. So I'll run your LinkedIn profile and help create the content for you. But I also started a healing and life coaching business this year. As you guys can see, I'm very into getting to the root cause of the dysfunction in society, having been on my own journey in life with, as I mentioned, physical health and mental illness, etc. Other things that I break down on my podcast, The Shay Rowbottom Show. But my new healing business does have a community that I just formed called Heal Tribe, where if you want to sign up, I do twice a month group webinars where I talk about a lot of the things that Max and I kind of covered here, how to open your mind up to other perspectives, how to let go of limiting beliefs, victim mentality, how to self-empower and learn how to regulate your own emotions, how to deal with family drama, because we all have that, and that's where a lot of this comes from in the first place. So I'm really, really passionate about marketing, but I'm also equally as passionate about healing now. So if you want to sign up for my healing community, you can go to shayrowbottom.com/healtribe and join the community there as well. So
awesome, Shay. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll definitely have to have you back on the show soon. Guys, I will be off next Thursday is Thanksgiving, so I hope everyone has an amazing Thanksgiving. I know it'll be crazy for me because Black Friday is the day after, so I don't sleep usually that night. It's just nonstop ads, but we'll see everyone back here the following Thursday. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.
Thank you.